making sure children are healthy, safe, loved, ready to learn, succeeding in school and in life. This is Our Children, a program brought to you by the Children's Trust.
Good morning. I'm Charles Auslander, President and CEO of the Children's Trust.
And I'm Ileana Varela with the Herbert Wertheim College of Medicine at FIU. And together we welcome you to Our Children. You know, the beginning of the Florida legislative session is only days away. There's lots of talk about increased funding for K through 12 education and the rollout of Common Core, but there's much more you need to know about.
So today we're going to talk about policy issues, pending legislation and funding for children's health, early childhood education, and the state's embattled child welfare system.
To get the ball rolling, joining us now are Maria Alonso, Board Chair of the Children's Trust and Chief Operations Officer of Citrus Health, and Diana Ragbeer, Director of Public Policy and Communications at the Children's Trust. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank
Good
you.
morning.
Good morning. So Maria, let's start with you. The Affordable Care Act has gotten so much attention this year, but what's happening with Medicaid expansion in Florida?
Well, Charles, we were lucky last year that we got Medicaid expansion for children. Really, the issue is getting the Medicaid expansion for the parents of those kids and for adults. There was a bill introduced in the Senate this year, but there's no companion bill in the House. So it doesn't look like right now there's going to be Medicaid expansion for that adult population. Of course, that makes it very difficult for families, because now you have a family that has a child with Medicaid, but the parents don't have Medicaid. And for them to access services, it becomes very difficult. And if they just happen to qualify for that medically needy program, which has what is actually a copayment, that could be as high as $1,800 a month. Imagine how difficult it is to get Medicaid to kick in. And unfortunately, what these families are doing is they're going to the emergency room to get their Medicaid kicked in, which is really increasing the cost of care in an inappropriate setting. So it would make so much sense if we could expand Medicaid, particularly for this population. But I'm hopeful, but I don't think that right now it looks like we're going to get that done this year.
Diana, as far as I understand, legal immigrant children who want to apply for KidCare have a 5-year waiting period. And Representative Jose Diaz and Senator Rene Garcia have this bill that would eliminate that waiting period. What are the chances that that's going to go through this time?
I think we have a greater chance than in years past for the simple reason that a lot of public education regarding that bill has taken place, and people see that as a fairness issue, that these children should not have to wait for 5 years while other children can get KidCare immediately. So you see a strong support showing from groups like the United Way, the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, the Catholic Conference of Bishops, the Association of Children's Hospitals, and I could go on and on. And so many groups have signed up. I think also the Agency for Healthcare Administration has revised its fiscal impact numbers. So this bill that was costed to cost $500 million last year, which certainly is not attractive. Now the fiscal impact has been assessed at $19.7 million, and it's much closer to what we had anticipated. You can see how much traction this bill is developing, because last week it went to its first committee of reference in the House, the Health Innovation Committee, and passed on an 11-0 unanimous vote.
And we happen to have a clip of Representative Diaz at that committee meeting. So let's roll on. Let's listen in.
Over 26 states have agreed to incorporate these kids into their programs. The state of Florida has not. Our peers have, Texas has, other competitors of ours have, and they are saving money because they're not allowing these kids to go to the emergency room. Over the last few years, we've talked about all sorts of different programs that cover kids. These are kids that are in this country legally. That's what I want to point out. These kids are here legally. If their parents qualify for it, the only barrier is this archaic law that should be removed off the books. This bill is sponsored by almost 20 organizations: the Children's Trust, the Children's Movement, the Florida Hospital Association, Florida Children's Council, Catholic Conference, United Way. If you can think of a good group that's doing good things and they're aware of this bill, they're supporting it.
Now, obviously, everyone knows that going to the emergency room is one of the most expensive types of health care. So maybe if they save money on that, maybe it'll free up some funds for other things.
No, I think that's a fair
Yeah.
point, Ileana. Maria, so let me ask you, is there anything on the horizon to increase funding for mental health services, and explain, if you will, what this means to families in real terms?
Well, there are some proposals that are being floated right now to increase children's mental health funding, particularly for families that are referred either by the Department of Children and Families or DJJ, that would need more in-home wraparound services to prevent them from coming into child welfare or the juvenile justice system. And there were 10 teams that were approved for this last year. There is a proposal to refund them again this year and to expand that to another 10 teams. I do believe that that is a possibility, and that we could get that done. A very important service, particularly now that the Department of Children and Families is going to get all this additional money for the protective investigators to identify more families that will in need of these services. And as we were saying, if you don't have the Medicaid expansion for the adults, and the adults are the ones that need the services, you certainly need these types of teams that can go into the homes and help these families to prevent them from coming into child welfare. So I think that's a possibility. There are other increases in mental health that are being proposed. At least there is no cutbacks this year. The recurring funds or the non-recurring funds that were proposed last year, I think, are going to be funded. So we're hopeful that along with the increase in the DCFPIs, we can get these teams funded as well.
Certainly lots at stake. Thank you for joining us, and we've got lots more that we want to talk about. Later on in our program, we're going to discuss funding for DCF to try to stem the horrible tide of children dying at the hands of their abusers. But first, the need for increased funding for early childhood education. So stay with us.
Daycare, childcare, babysitting. It may not matter to you now, but it should. When you're on the job, your children are either learning or not. So before you drop your children off someplace on the way to work, think about whether that place is going to prepare them for the future. Find a star-rated childcare center near you by visiting thechildrenstrust.org. The Children's Trust, because all children are our children. It's not all about the school, or the teacher, or the neighborhood you live in, but those books on the shelf will open many doors when you open them up and read to your kids.
Read.
Li.
Li.
Read to your kids.
Let them read to you.
Because when kids read, we all succeed.
To learn more, log on to thechildrenstrust.org and click on Read to Learn. The Children's Trust, because all children are our children.
Welcome back. We're talking this morning about important issues to watch this legislative session. Still with us is my colleague Diana Ragbeer, Director of Public Policy and Communications at the Children's Trust. And joining us now is Evelio Torres, President and CEO of the Early Learning Coalition of Miami-Dade and Monroe Counties.
Now, I have a question for both of you. I want to start off with Evelio because you just joined us, but I also want you to chime in on this because we all know that funding for education is always a big topic during the session, and we know that the governor has pledged an increase in funding per child, but K through 12. So what about the little guys? What about early education? Don't they require also, quality learning?
They do, and we've had pretty much flat funding for years in Florida. 10 years we've had flat funding in Florida. So now with the increase that the governor is proposing, we hope that it's not only an increase in dollars, but that it also comes with some strings attached so that we can use those dollars to promote high quality. Because one thing is to take the dollars and just place children into the program. Another thing is to take those dollars and make sure that the children are being placed in high quality programs. And high quality programs cost a little bit more money, but the outcomes are much better for children and for the school system. Because remember, a lot of the kids that are in these pre-K programs end up in the public school system. So you have two choices for a kindergarten teacher. Either you work with kids that are still behind when they enter kindergarten, go through that remedial process, or you get kids that are ready for kindergarten. You can only get those kids that are ready for kindergarten if they come from high quality programs where the teachers are credentialed and they have all the appropriate curriculum materials.
That's what I was mentioning, because you throw that word out, quality, but what is quality, and how do parents know where to find it?
You know, parents need to learn how to ask questions. One of the best indicators of quality is child-teacher interaction. A lot of parents, they go into a facility, they go into a preschool, and they look at, you know, is it a pretty building? Is it, you know, do they have all the little chairs are brand new? That's not really, I mean, that's important, but it's not as important as the interaction between the teacher and the child. What are the staff qualifications? What type of training have they had? What curriculum that they use? What is the program for the day? Every pre-K school should have a program, and that program is for the week, but it details the activities for the day. You don't want children that are 3 and 4 years old to be sitting in a chair like you have in elementary school learning, because a lot of times they really don't have the capacity to do that. So you want to incorporate play with learning, and again, that teacher-child interaction is critically important for the learning process. You want to make sure that the kids are learning their basic shapes and numbers and things that they're going to need to get them ready for kindergarten.
And parental involvement, very, very important, and that's a very strong component of quality.
What are your hopes for early education in this session?
So the governor's proposed budget does send a strong signal to the legislature. His proposed addition of nearly $60 million, 30 of which would go to fund additional slots, and an increase for voluntary pre-kindergarten of $100 per child, as well as some professional training, starts a conversation that Evelio was talking about, where we have been pushing for raising quality all along. We want to see more child care centers offering high quality programs. We want to see child care workers be properly compensated. And so we want children to thrive in these environments. You know, Dave Lawrence used to say, this is not wholesale babysitting. Right. This is school readiness. This is about preparing children to enter the school system. The school superintendent loves when we get it right in the early years. We're sending him children who can pay attention, who can form lines, who can follow instruction, and who have cognitive development and basic social emotional skills. So that's what we're talking about this session, and this has been a dream come true. We haven't had this conversation for 10 years, and so we're very hopeful.
You're pinching yourself.
Yes, is this real?
Exactly.
So we are optimistic.
So let's ask Evelio, how about you? We've heard Diana's thoughts on the session. What are yours, and do you have any great wishes for this session, and tell us about them?
Sure, I think the new dollars are important, but we also need to make sure that particularly children that are in communities that are low-income communities and where the schools may not necessarily have the resources, that we are able to create some type of process so that we can reimburse those schools or pay those schools for higher quality, because under the current system, which is, it's a complicated process and formula, but under the current system, a lot of these schools that need the money the most are getting paid the least just because of something called a market rate, which is a little bit complicated. But the key is, how do we make sure that all the kids have the same opportunities across the entire county, not only in certain neighborhoods? And that's a little bit difficult to do. And then the other thing is, we need to try to make sure that if I am the owner of one of these private pre-Ks, when about 80% of our children are in these private child care centers, if I take some of my money and reinvest it for quality and hire better qualified teachers, I should be able to get some type of incentive for doing that. So with those new dollars, being able to provide that brand, you know, that new incentive, whether it's a 10% above what they would usually get paid or 15%, but there's got to be a reward for making that investment in quality. Difficult to do in the really high need areas, easier to do in the more affluent areas. So again, we need to find that balance so that we can level the playing field. So not just the new money, but the new money with the quality attachments.
I know that you mentioned some tips of what parents can look for when they visit places, but is there somewhere they can go? Is there a website or somewhere where they can access information as to quality daycare centers? Either one of them.
There are 3 websites that they can go to obtain information. They can go, number one, they should be looking at the licensing information for that particular center. So they can go to the DCF website. They can obtain licensing information, find out if there are any serious licensing violations. They can also go to the Children's Trust website and determine if they're a quality count center. And if they are quality count centers, how many stars do they have? Is it a 3-star center, a 4-star center, a 5-star center? Or to the Early Learning Coalition, where you can obtain some of the same information. Another really important question for parents to ask is whether that center is accredited or not. That's a big indicator of quality. Has the center gone through that process of accreditation? It's almost like a Better Business Bureau seal of approval.
Okay, great
so
idea.
they have to go through that learning process and learning to ask questions.
Great sources there. So I know all of you are optimistic, but just in case, pack your genie in the bottle, Aladdin's lamp, rabbit's foot, whatever, when you guys go up to Tallahassee. Wish you luck, both of you.
Thank you.
Up next, after years of cuts to DCF, now there is talk about restoring money. We'll get into the nitty-gritty. And before we go, we're going to tell you how to get your kids into the hottest talent competition in town. You won't want to miss that, so do not touch that remote.
Someday, he'll own his own company. She's going to have a career in graphic design. And believe it or not, future pediatrician. And so that your kids can succeed tomorrow, the Children's Trust is investing in them today by supporting hundreds of programs and services dedicated to helping kids and parents. To find a program for your child or learn more about what we can do for your family, log on to thechildrenstrust.org or call 211. The Children's Trust, because all children are our children. It's not about the classroom or the computers or how much money you make. It's not where you live or where you come from. When it comes to kids succeeding in school, the #1 factor is
me.
Moi.
Yo.
Parents like me and you.
if you want to make a difference in your children's lives, read to them, be selective about their care, encourage them to get good grades. You have to be active and involved. To find the support you need, log on to thechildrenstrust.org. The Children's Trust, because all children are our children.
Welcome back. Joining Diana, Ileana, and me is Katie Black, Director of External Affairs at Our Kids of Miami-Dade and Monroe Counties. So Katie, Our Kids might be a mystery to some people. Can you give us a sense of, in terms of the child welfare system, what's the role and responsibility of Our Kids, and how does that fit into the whole issue of when children are taken into custody by the state? Where does Our Kids fit in?
Absolutely. So Florida has privatized child welfare. So Our Kids is the privatized model that oversees the functions that used to be done by the Department of Children and Families, such as foster care and adoption. The investigation and removals of kids are still done by the department, since that is a state function. So Our Kids works with the community. It's called community-based care, and utilizes all of the resources in our community to best care for kids that are, in foster care.
Well, that's a pretty good introduction to it. So give us a little bit of the why. Why did that happen?
I think the legislature thought it was easier for a smaller version of a system. So for the community really to take interest and be involved in what's going on. I mean, this is our community and we need to take care of our kids, and I think that was the premise behind why the legislature thought that creating little organizations across the state was more of a better use of our funding to help kids be the best that they can be once they're in foster care.
You know, it seems to me that whenever we hear these horrible stories of abuse in the news, and unfortunately we do hear about them way too often, someone always cries out, well, there's just not enough people to investigate, and that's always always keeps coming up. So the governor now is proposing funds that would free money to hire hundreds of child protective investigators. How do you think this will play? Is that the answer? Is it just the beginning, or
So I don't think there's any silver bullet. I don't think that funding is a silver bullet. I think that we applaud the governor for what he wants to do. We do believe there needs to be more funding in the system. The governor's proposal only funds for the protective investigators, which are those that work for the department that go out and do the investigations. We would like for the legislature to look holistically at the system. If they have more investigators, there might be more kids that come into foster care. And so on the case management side, which is the CBC side, we believe there should be maybe more of a capacity for those kids that might come into care. So I liken it to hiring a bunch of new ambulances and putting a bunch of sick people that need services and getting to the hospital and there's no beds. And so we really need to look holistically at how we can really build a system that works for kids.
But it is important, though, Katie, to have a investigative corps that is enough of a resource to match the need that we have. But of course, you make a very good point that along the entire system, there has to be good and fair resources in order really to manage things. I'd also say, and I'm curious for your thoughts on it, whether you think that the training, both pre-service and in-service, is really adequate, or whether we need to look at those sorts of issues as well.
I think that we need to train so that we can retain. If we're giving the case managers, the front line, the CPIs, what they need in terms of knowledge and support, we will see better outcomes. You know, when a police officer goes into a horrible, gruesome crime scene, they take them off the beat. They wrap them in services. They give them the therapeutic and employee services that they need and make sure that they've gotten to digest what they have encountered and then put them back on. We don't do that for child welfare workers. We don't give them that support that they need. And so you see the burnout. You see the emotional stress. I think if we can help train and also support both case managers and CPIs, which are the child protection workers, we would be able to have better outcomes.
Is this something that you simply cannot just throw money at?
I don't think you can just throw money. Yes, we need an increase in funding because we've been able to do more. We're able to do a lot more in-home services for kids and keep kids with their families when appropriate. We've been able to look at more evidence-based programming, which costs more, but the outcomes are better. So yes, I think funding is a portion of it, but I think there's a larger picture that we need to look at when we're looking at child welfare.
So Diana, when it comes to that larger picture, we rely so often on you for your expertise in terms of the legislative session, what's going on in Tallahassee. I suppose even in the winter, the climate is hot in Tallahassee. So give us a sense on this very complicated issue of dealing with child abuse and neglect. You know, what are your thoughts for this session?
Well, I'm always an internal optimist, but I think that, we are looking at some additional revenue this session. There is about an $800 million surplus. There are plans for some of that, of course, including tax breaks. But I think that the legislature and the governor are definitely paying attention to the child welfare system. It's unfortunate that it took a rash of tragedies to get everyone's attention, but finally, I think that they are getting it and they're hearing about it. So we've seen, the holding of numerous workshops across the state. We're seeing a lot of select committees taking up this issue. The two committees charged with this issue, the Healthy Families Committee in the House and Children and Families in the Senate, chaired by Senator Sobel and Representative Harrell, are certainly hearing a lot about this issue with different panels and experts. The Casey Foundation has come to Florida with its experts and its advice at the request of now Secretary Esther Jacobo. I think everybody is definitely paying attention to it. There's leadership involved. Senate President Don Gates, Will Weatherford, the Speaker, and as I mentioned, the Governor. So we are starting to see some traction on this issue. There is draft legislation currently being drafted. So I am hopeful.
So I'm curious from your perspective, what would you say to people based on what you do and your experience, what would you say to people that that they're not getting from the media, from newspapers, from their politicians, but because you're in the business that you're in, you feel that you should be telling them this.
There are amazing, dedicated people in this system that really deeply care. We have amazing, amazing foster parents, amazing adoptive parents. Everybody can play a role in our system. I said this before, it's our community and we need to take care of the kids in our community. So if they can't foster, if they can't adopt, they can give of their time, of their money. They can get involved. Everybody can play a role in the system and not just read a paper and say, oh, why is this happening? People need to act and they can get involved. And so they can go and visit us on our website. It's www.ourkids.us and learn more about ways that they can be part of our solution in our community.
Do you think sometimes that message doesn't get
it
through
gets
because
lost.
it gets lost?
Yeah, I think it gets lost. You know, you hear about all these tragedies and they're horrible. I mean, you read about children and innocence that's lost, and you really want to do something, and a lot of people don't know necessarily how.
Well, that's a good place to start on your website. Well, thank you for joining us. Best of luck to all of you. It's going to be a jam-packed legislative session, that's for sure. To keep up with what's happening, regularly visit the advocacy page at thechildrenstrust.org and sign up to receive the weekly Capital Connection newsletter during session. And now, to the biggest talent competition in Miami-Dade. Young Talent Big Dreams launched just a couple of weeks ago, and auditions continue all through the month of March before semifinals in April. So, if your child or teenager can sing, dance, play a musical instrument, compose original music, or spoken word, visit actorsplayhouse.org. Get them registered before it's too late. It's free. The prizes are great. It's a wonderful experience, and the Children's Trust is a sponsor. Do not pass it up. I'm Ileana Varela. On behalf of the Children's Trust and Charles Auslander, thanks to all of you for watching this special edition of Our Children. Enjoy the rest of your day, and remember to stay informed during this legislative session and always. Bye-bye.
Our Children is brought to you by the Children's Trust. The Children's Trust invests in programs and services that help make children healthy, safe, loved, ready to learn, succeed in school and in life. To access its funded programs and services in Miami-Dade County, visit thechildrenstrust.org or call the Children's Trust helpline at 211, because all children are our children.
Books are the key to unlock a child's imagination and open their eyes to a world of learning. But in some communities, the ratio of books per child is 1 to 300. The Children's Trust encourages you to introduce your children to the power of your nearest library. Increasing access to books helps your child succeed in school, and the best part is that this amazing resource is absolutely free. To learn more about how to make reading a priority for your child, visit thechildrenstrust.org and click on Read to Learn, because all children are our children.
It's not about the classroom or the computers or how much money you make. It's not where you live or where you come from. When it comes to kids succeeding in school, the #1 factor is
Me. Moi.
Yo.
Parents like me and you.
if you want to make a difference in your children's lives, read to them, be selective about their care, encourage them to get good grades. You have to be active and involved. To find the support you need, log on to thechildrenstrust.org. The Children's Trust, because all children are our children.